Hello and welcome to another episode on India Career Center. I'm delighted to host Mr. Julien Martinson, a aviation professional by his profession. Aviation as an industry is very fascinating. Just to quote some data, in the year 2023, approximately 9 billion people traveled across the world um, through various airlines in a single year, which obviously is one of the highest ever since the COVID time. To learn more about this industry and to learn about how this industry is going to have opportunities, we have today's topic, which is the present and future of aviation industry opportunities. And to do that, I am honored to have Julien Martinson. Hi, Julien. How are you? And you're joining us from where today?
Good afternoon. I'm joining you from Toronto, Canada. It was a pleasure to be on your show today and to be invited to talk about an industry that I'm so passionate about. So thank you very much for having me on your podcast today.
Okay. And what is the time, local time now? Like, for example, I'm recording it in India right now. It is 8:15 p.m. Indian Standard Time. What time is it in Toronto now?
In Toronto, it's 10:45 in the morning. So we're a few hours difference, but the timing is absolutely perfect.
Okay, excellent. Okay, to start our conversation, Julien, take us through your experience in the aviation industry, because I know you have spent several years in the industry yourself, and you have also educated yourself in this industry with your undergraduate and postgraduate courses. So take us through that journey of your career as well as your education.
Well, over the 20 years of experience that I've have in aviation, my experience includes in-flight operations, airside security, groundside security operations, as well as customer service for Canada's leading airline in the terminal. My academic background includes language arts and business administration. And then I decided to continue my education with the studies in aviation management at Georgian College in Barrie, Ontario. And after that, I decided to continue my master's studies at Griffith University in Brisbane, Australia, with a full master's in aviation management. And my thesis was on my favorite subject. It's the global pilot supply and demand for pilots.
Fantastic. So just wanted to understand, you did your undergraduate based in Canada, but you decided to do the master's in Australia. Any particular reason?
Well, the program was offered 100% online. Okay. So it was logistically, it was easier to do an online program. Griffith University has their second largest campus is their online campus. So they have 15,000 students registered worldwide that study various topics online. So it was the easiest option at the time to study the master's in aviation management and do the program 100% online. And Griffith University coincidentally offered the online program, which is the reason why I chose them.
Okay. And during that time, you were also professionally engaged in terms of your career, or you had taken up some break to take up this education?
Well, as a matter of fact, I started my master's studies during the pandemic. So when the airport was full of crickets and not much was happening, I decided to put my nose in the books, as they say, and study. However, at the meantime, I did secure employment with ASP doing airside security operations, and I did that until the economy started picking up and the aviation industry started picking up its passenger volume again.
Okay, now to understand about how the industry was in 2023, I believe that was one of the record year in terms of the overall performance. So can you give us a overall sense of what was the total industry volume in terms of the top line or whatever? What is the number of passengers who traveled, number of airlines, number of aeroplanes? I think there are some wonderful graphics which are available on the internet where you can see continuously aeroplanes are graphically moving around. So it's a great treat to see those things. But if you can take us through these numbers to give an overview of the industry for 2023.
Yes, there is an app called Flight Path 24, and on that app, you can actually see the airplanes live in the sky as they are crossing the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. And many times I've used that app to track flights as they land and as they taxi around the airport. And you can see, oh, well, he's making a turn there. And you walk through the window and you see the airplane on the ramp. So those apps are available and they're always fascinating to follow. But having a look at some of the macro numbers of the aviation industry. So the International Civil Aviation Organization is an umbrella of the United Nations, and they help 193 countries cooperate together within the aviation context. So the aviation industry is a little bit like a family. So all the countries have to kind of cooperate together in order to make it a safe and efficient environment. And the International Civil Aviation Organization is the organization that oversees that, and they have offices all over the world, including Montreal, for an example. Their current projections for the 2023 is approximately 8.7 billion passengers, which is 95% of the 2019 passenger volume. There are more than 5,000 airlines in the world and 9,728 airplanes in the sky at any one given moment, carrying more than 1,270,000 passengers at any given time. So this is quite a large number, and it requires a lot of cooperation and regulation by multiple levels. IATA's mission, that's the International Aviation Air Transportation Association, has 320 airlines representing 120 different countries. So by no means is it a small organization, and they've estimated that 10 years ago they had 10,000 airports worldwide. However, now the count has gone up to 40,000 airports worldwide, including helicopter pads, runways, fields, and commercial and private general aviation landing strips. There are about 400 commercial aircraft taking off every hour. And in the United States, there are more than 13,513 airports. So it's the largest country with the highest number of airports in the world.
Fantastic. These are mind-boggling numbers. And do you have a sense of how many people are actually getting employed through this? Any broad idea?
Yes. So the global market for airlines is estimated to be $638 billion, and it is projected to reach 1.1 trillion, which is an increase of 7.6% of annual growth in monetary spending. You can look at the industry by the number of airplanes or the number of airports. However, you can also look at it how much money it's being produced. The industry is growing very fast, and the most recent estimates suggest that the air transportation will grow to $5.7 trillion. And this also represents a big demand in employment. So it's nice to say that we have lots of airports and airlines. However, to be able to do that requires not only manpower, but also a lot of strategic planning, management at all levels. So that includes, we need pilots to fly the airplanes. We need aircraft engineers to design airplanes that are more efficient. the industry needs air traffic controllers to manage the airplanes once they are in the sky and while they are on the ground. And you also need airport and airline managers that operate the business side of the business.
Yes, it's quite a mind-boggling number. And you said that the organization which is working together is like a small family, you mentioned. So they coordinate with, for example, if a flight is taking off from, let's say, Montreal from Canada, it is coordinating with the other country's air traffic controller system in terms of its flight path and things like that. How that works?
This is done through air traffic control management. So, for an example, in Canada, there's four air traffic control regions. However, each airport has its own air traffic control. So as the airplane flies um, across the globe, it'll be handed off from one air traffic control tower to the next until finally it reaches its final destination, and then it is guided in by the air traffic controller. So all of these operations have to be standardized um, so that the pilot can transition easily from one air traffic control tower to the other. So this implies clear communication, standard operations, and so forth.
Right. So, which means that there is a huge amount of opportunity, as you mentioned, by 2030, the growth in number of airlines as well as in terms of the overall value. That's a huge jump which we are expecting because of the number of travelers increasing. And any particular reason which I think which is also there in your book, also we'll come to the book a little later. Uh, any specific reason why you think the air traffic is something which is constantly increasing? What are the primary reasons?
So yes, the reasons why aviation industry is seeing such a surge in passenger volume and in passenger demand is, number one, the increase in domestic income. So as the domestic income increases per family, they have more disposable income. And so when this happens, family members will want to explore the world, and therefore they will purchase airfare tickets. Number two, we've seen a lot of deregulation in the industry. So that means countries are withdrawing their visa requirements and COVID requirements, inoculations, etc. And so the paperwork that's required to travel abroad is being eliminated to a certain extent. And so this makes it easier for people to travel if they do not need to require visas and other things that become prohibitive in traveling. The third reason is that we've seen the introduction of the low-cost carrier already for 10 years ago, but they're taking a larger and larger market share of the industry. And so their motto for air travel is providing air travel at the lowest possible price. And they make their incomes off of auxiliary fees and other ways. However, this has made air travel so much more affordable to the general public. Number four, we've seen the modification of aircraft design, which includes the carbon fiber fabrication of aircraft. So we're moving from steel aircraft to carbon fiber composite materials. So the whole aircraft by itself is now lighter weight than before. Therefore, we're able to fly a longer distance with the same fuel cost as before. And number three is that finally we're seeing the introduction of the Airbus 321 long range. So this enables passengers to fly from medium-sized airports to another medium-sized airport on a shorter runway without having to transfer through a hub. So hubs in the old days, the hubs were critical in terms of connecting flights. However, with this new aircraft, passengers will not need to connect through hubs. They can just fly directly to their final destination. For example, you can fly with the Airbus 331 long range, you could fly from a medium-sized airport such as Victoria, British Columbia, to Nice, France. So it can get you straight from the West Coast straight to the beach in France without traveling through a major airport like Vancouver or Charles de Gaulle, which traditionally would have to go through one of those hubs. So this is open for all those combination of reasons. It has made it so much easier for people to travel, and this is not going to be stopping. This momentum is going to keep going. Recently, we have seen the purchase of 500 Airbus 321 by Indigo Airlines, and this was announced at the Paris Air Show recently, and which is the largest single aircraft purchase in the history of aviation. And so with this purchase, it's not only excellent for the industry, but it also shows the confidence that Indigo Airlines has in their traveling public. And so as those orders start coming in, they will start putting those aircraft into operation, which is going to require manpower. Now, the average airplane requires between 60 and 140 personnel, from flight crew to ramp crew to sales and marketing, and through other services depending on the structure of the airline. So with each aircraft that the airline brings on, they are going to require so much more personnel. For example, with each aircraft, you may need up to 8 pilot crew. So with every aircraft, you would need an additional 16 new pilots. So if an airline is bringing on 10 new aircraft in a single year, they would need 160 new pilots. But where are they getting the pilots from? So the bigger airlines will hire from the smaller airlines, and the small airlines from the schools. But the question is, are the schools recruiting enough pilots to meet the future demand? And this is the critical question in order to meet pilot supply and demand. Now in Canada, recently with Sunwing, they have had to cancel their flight operations out of Winnipeg, servicing 2 destinations in Mexico due to operational needs, which I interpret as a lack of pilot workforce. They just can't find the pilots. And so you're also looking at the international supply and demand of pilots. Not all regions of the world grow at the same rate, and so as the rate grows, in order to attract your pilot skill force, you can just increase the wages or enhance the work lifestyle combination, and pilots from overseas will apply and get those jobs. And we see this typically also in the Middle East, which has countries that are very wealthy. So the simplest thing that they need to do is just increase the wage, and pilots who may not have any ties locally or may not have any family restrictions may just fly over there because it's more lucrative. And so this further compounds the workforce, the pilot workforce supply and demand.
Fantastic. So you initially mentioned that each aircraft, with the addition of each aircraft, you may need about 60 additional people, which includes the pilot and all other staff, right?
Sorry, yeah. So it depends on the design, the service flow of the airline. So if you have a very simple service flow structure like Southwest Airlines, that is low-cost carrier, you may need up to 60 employees for each additional aircraft, depending on the size of the aircraft. If you have a larger airline like Cathay Pacific with 3 service classes, Yeah, three service classes and a complex fleet with big airplanes, medium airplanes, and small airplanes. You require inventory of parts, which is more difficult to manage than just an airline with one fleet type. And
Mm.
so, in a scenario like that, you may need up to 160 staff members for each aircraft acquisition that they add to their fleet. So it depends on the size of the aircraft. If you've got little airplanes, it's more simple. But if you have the bigger airplanes with multiple classes, economy class, premium economy, and business class, that means you need three sets of meals, three sets of in-flight entertainment, etc., etc. So this is more complex. And every time it gets more complex, you need more staff in order to deliver that service. However, we're just talking about um, flight deck crew. You need approximately 8 crews per aircraft because each aircraft has a captain and a first officer. So we're
Yeah.
talking about 2 people in the cockpit. And so for each aircraft acquisition, you would need 16 additional pilots approximately.
Why
Yeah.
you are saying 16?
Oh, well,
At a point
that's
of time, you're just having two pilots to run it, right?
well, this is correct. So you need 2 pilots on the outbound flight, and
Mm.
then when they arrive at destination, those 2 are on off
On a
duty.
break, yeah.
Yeah, on a layover, and then you need 2 pilots to come back, so that now you're at 4. And then when you arrive back at the home base, those guys are on break, and then
Yeah.
you need 2 more pilots to do the outbound flight again. And then when that plane arrives to destination, you need 2 more to come back. So now, if they, right there, you've already mentioned you've gone through 4 crews in 2 days, right? And then you need vacation and you training pilots. So very quickly, you need eight crew. This is also for flight attendants as well.
Mm.
Yeah, so
Okay.
to run an airplane, you need multiple crews, not just 2 pilots,
Yeah.
just for that reason. Yeah. So in the time when I was a flight attendant, we had 2 aircraft based in Vancouver. And so the aircraft would leave Vancouver and fly to London. And so when the plane arrives in London, you need 2 more pilots to fly the airplane back. And so as soon as the plane gets back on the ground, then the plane gets cleaned, and then you need 2 more pilots to fly the plane to Amsterdam. And then when the plane arrives in Amsterdam, you need 2 more pilots to fly the plane back to Vancouver. So you're already at 4
Mm.
crew, and you've only done 2 days of the week, right? And you cannot you can only fly to Europe once a week, right? Because you fly the outbound, and then the plane comes back and then goes to Frankfurt and goes back to Vancouver, and then it goes back to London and picks up the crew that you left there 3 days before, and then they come back. And so you need multiple pilots, not just 2. You need at least 8 crew.
Mm.
Yeah.
And of course, if it is domestic, for example, if you talk about Indian operations and your aircrafts are flying within India, which are like short distance, 2 hours, 3 hours distance, then
Yes.
the calculation will become different. Because in
Well,
those cases, the number of pilots can actually take up multiple number of short trips in a day.
Well, this is true. However, there's a maximum amount of hours that a pilot can fly in a month. That's around 80 hours, flight hours in a month. So while a normal person, an employed person like a secretary would go to work 160 hours in a month, 40 hours a week, a pilot may only fly 20 hours a week. However, the aircraft itself, it's a machine, and it flies 7 days a week, ideally. So having a tight schedule means that the airline makes more money. So to maximize the revenue, they want to the airlines will want to schedule that aircraft with the maximum amount of flight hours in a week. However, the human body cannot work like that. So that an average pilot would fly around 20 hours. So then therefore it justifies the multiple crews.
Yeah,
regardless of whether you're doing international or domestic.
Makes sense. And I think all this knowledge you have tried to put together in your book, which is called the Ultimate Guide to Careers in Aviation. So take us briefly through this book. What was the motivation for you to write this book, and what you would like to actually achieve through this book in terms of communicating to the target audience?
Right. So just to take one step back, with my thesis in global pilot supply and demand, I came to realize that there was a big disparity among pilots, and that not all regions would grow in the same way. And so I decided to write the book as an introduction to aviation careers, that being pilot, air traffic control, aviation management, which is airline and airport management, and aircraft engineer. So those four careers, which are the toughest ones for the industry to fill, because it requires a lot of education in order to achieve those roles. And so in the book, I talk about the global trends that I've already discussed in this interview, as well as the surge in passenger volume, which is not going to change. And also I talk about the various trends in aviation, being environmental trends, the need to recycle, being environmentally aware, passenger volume, the congestion that we face in many of the big hubs, and the underutilization of medium to smaller size airports, which is definitely going to change over the next 10 years. And so the book is targeted to Gen Z, young people, so that's people aged between 12 and 28, who are in the position of still exploring careers, and they've just come out of high school, and they want a little bit of information about aviation careers. So this is an ideal book, an introductory book for them, where they can have a complete overview of the aviation industry, and then they can choose which career they would like to read on. Or you could read on all four careers and then decide if you want more information about one specific career. The final chapter of the book talks a little bit about networking, resume writing, those types of things, where to find jobs, and what schools provide the programs that are required in order to get those high-paying, stable career jobs that people are seeking.
Okay, as you mentioned, one of the biggest bottleneck in the aviation industry would be the availability of trained pilots. I think they are the most crucial people in this whole equation. Of course, all the other categories, like for example the air traffic controller or the aircraft engineer or the aviation management, I think all of them are equally important, but the skill and the availability of trained pilots is one of the biggest factors, so to speak. So moving on, you have dealt with 4 different categories of aviation industry professions in your book, and the 4 of them, one of it I think we discussed quite well about the pilots. The other 3 are related to air traffic controller, aircraft engineering, and aviation management. So in these categories, if you can give us some sense of what kind of opportunities are there available now, and how these demands are going to grow by 2030.
So regarding air traffic control, each jurisdiction will have their own air traffic control authority. For an example, in Canada we have NAV Canada, and the UK we have NATS, the National Air Traffic Control System, NATS. In the United States, it's the FFA. So each country has their own air traffic control authority. So you have to apply directly to them. And depending on the size of the country and the geography, you may be positioned at a small airport, a medium-sized airport, or a very large airport, or you may be positioned at a station where your territory is very large and you're overseeing the aircraft in your area. In terms of air traffic, aircraft engineer, there's lots of opportunities for growth. That being particularly with the development of a supersonic flight and outer space flight. Those issues are not going away, and they're still tickling people's curiosity, and so this will always become a necessity. Furthermore, we have the introduction of drones, manned and unmanned drones. So this will continue to, as the years progress, it'll continue to take on a bigger and bigger role of the aviation industry in terms of engineering and inspecting buildings, and in terms of search and rescue operations and military operations, as well as health services, and the delivery of the last mile in terms of delivering packages to remote locations. And so this comes again with its own regulations and policy, and the potential of drone pirates, people stealing sneakers out of the air. So this is a potential problem with drones. And in terms of aviation management, now that career splits into two: airline operations manager and airport management. So airlines are also facing their own challenges in terms of carbon offsetting, recycling, going green. All those types of initiatives are not going away, and they will continue to be on the forefront of the airline industry, as well as with airport growth. So passengers are becoming more and more demanding in terms of the resources and the experiences that they want out of an airport. Traditionally, airports were a transition point from one mode of transportation to another mode of transportation. So they would go from a car or a railroad mode of transportation to an air mode form of transportation. However, this is not the case. Airports have now become a destination in of itself. And we see that in Shanghai International Airport with their big solarium and their train systems and hotel systems and a lot of shopping. Airports have become economic superpower of the city and the country of itself. Heathrow Airport brings in I don't know how many jobs and how many pounds to the economy of the UK. That it's simply not just, it's not to be overlooked in the slightest. It becomes a significant contributor to the economy and to the employment. And that could be said for many airports around the world. And so the airports have to become more and more efficient. And that being said, now with the introduction of the Airbus 321 long range, it'll open up the opportunities for medium-sized airports to take on a bigger role. So we're seeing smaller airports that are taking on a distinct airport concept. So while they are small, they think like big airports. They want a concept, they want a brand, they want an image, they want to be globally connected. So smaller airports like Halifax or Victoria now can become an international destination by itself by welcoming the Airbus 321, and they could become an international hub, therefore relieving a lot of passenger volume out of the hubs.
So when you mentioned about the size of airport 2-3 times, is there an international standard which defines airport to be small, medium, or large, or what is the definition?
Well, there are standards. So it depends on the volume of aircraft coming in and the size of the airplanes that are landing there, and so therefore classifications are set. My fingertips, I don't know exactly what they are. So, but there are airports that maybe only have 2 flights a day or 40 flights a day, and there are airports that have 60 flights coming and going every hour, like Toronto Pearson Airport. The bigger airports, they try to inevitably attract more traffic
Mm.
by the connections that they're able to service. So, for an example, at Toronto Pearson, which is a classic hub, you may have flights coming in from in India and from Brazil and from Europe. And then from this hub, they can go to other regional airports throughout Canada and North America. And so it's those hubs, it's the connecting flights that make those connections, those hubs so critical. However, now with the introduction of the Airbus 321 long range, we'll be able to have direct flights, but without having to connect through big hubs. So it'll be easier for passengers. The Airbus 321 long range has a capacity of 170 to 200 passengers. So in reality, it is much easier to group together 200 passengers to agree on one departure time, to agree to go to a second destination, than
Mm.
it is to find 300 or 400 passengers to agree on one time. Now, for an airline, it is more efficient to have one big aircraft because you only need 2 pilots, for an example. However, from a passenger perspective, it is better to have 2 medium-sized airplanes that seat 200 passengers, because therefore the passengers would have choice. Those 2 airplanes are going from point A to point B. The passengers would have a choice between a morning flight or an afternoon flight, which gives more options. But for the airline, it's more expensive. Also, you can have with 2 aircraft, you could have from one going from point A to B and the other going from point A to C. And so there's more destination choices that are a possibility as well.
Right, fantastic. How do you see the future trend, especially, I mean, when it comes to the aviation fuel? I think we keep hearing about the sustainable aviation fuel. A lot of experiments happening already on that. So, apart from the fuel, what else new trends are we seeing, or are we going to see in the future for aviation industry?
Well, the future trends are so there's lots of environmental trends. There's carbon offsetting, electric aircraft are a big trend, and there's still some uncertainties about what happens if your aircraft runs out of batteries. However, they're still introducing electric aircraft for smaller operations. And there is also manned and unmanned aircraft, which is still a big trend that is not going away. And as people find new uses and applications for manned and unmanned drones, um, it'll become a bigger and bigger part of the aviation network, with requiring added regulation. I can see in the future airports having a combination of runways and vertical takeoff and landing pads, as well as helicopter operations, as well as general aviation, all integrated into one airfield. And so as you're integrating more and more variables, it becomes more complex because they operate with different speeds, with different technologies, and different types of services and maintenance are required for each time you introduce a new element into this complex system. We're seeing a lot of trends in manned, unmanned ones, and environmental trends, as well as another critical issue is that we are seeing a high increase in passenger volume in the Chinese passengers, the China passenger Asia. Asia represents 53% of the global passenger aviation volume, which is huge. It's very big. They say that India has the highest propensity to travel, which means that India is a very large continent, but people want to discover and explore the world on their own. And so each one by one, they're booking flights for their own. And so the increase in passenger
Mm.
volume within that population demographic is going to get higher and higher. So now the challenge that means is that for airlines, typically airline operations have catered around the Western norm of social conduct. But as we see a cultural shift in our passenger volume, this will also need to be addressed. Um, so the irony is that yes, aviation is global, and we don't see it anymore as a problem getting on an airplane in Chicago and flying to Mexico or flying to Rio de Janeiro. But now we're starting to see a much higher increase in passenger volume from India. So they come with their own standards of what are the cultural norms. So maybe we need to adjust the menus more to cater to their appetite and to their standards. Maybe we need to accommodate their cultural norms and respect their cultural norms more in an integral way of how the airline operates. There's another irony in the industry as well, that the airlines make more money by putting the seats tighter and tighter and smaller, more compact seats. However, in the Western world, we see that people are getting bigger. And so this becomes a challenge as the passengers are getting bigger and becoming better. You're getting them smaller and smaller seats. So the industry is really going to have to think very strategically on how you're going to accommodate bigger passengers and maintain smaller seats. So those initiatives are bipolar. So I can see in the future maybe they're going to have a premium economy for passengers that require bigger seats, and somehow the industry will have to accommodate that. Also, we're going to see an increase in multiculturalism and passengers with special needs, including the elderly. And so this was also going to become a bigger part of the airline and airport operation, is catering to a large number of special needs.
And you mentioned about carbon emission. So do you see in a few years we will also see carbon tax being levied?
Carbon tax on passengers at some point. We do see some of that where there is an initiative to do carbon offsetting, and passengers have the option to offset their carbon tax through a fee. I don't know if that's going to work or not. The global aviation industry, they do make recommendations. Those recommendations are taken on by each country, and then each country pushes those recommendations down to the airlines and the airports. Now, it's not the people themselves that make the pollution, it's the aircraft. So it'll have to go back to the aircraft manufacturers to be able to produce aircraft that are carbon neutral, or that emit fewer carbon emissions. So this was going to be a critical area. And finally, it requires the cooperation of both national policy, standardized national policy, as well as the cooperation of airports, as well as the cooperation of airlines and aircraft manufacturers. And so once you put those four components together, you may have opposing views that in order to achieve those standards, it may be more costly. And so it doesn't become very effective to impose those standards if it comes at an increased price. And so sometimes there's a little bit of reluctance. Some organizations think strategies like they recycle one thing to gain a lot of publicity while they overlook and throw smoke on another area that is a little bit more of a problem. And so you see a little bit of that too in the industry.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I know. I mean, these are things which will evolve in due course of time. So I think we actually have covered quite a bit of ground today in terms of discussing the overview of how the industry looks like and things like that. So Julian, thank you for sharing all your insight from your professional career and also all the insights from your book. And I would encourage the young students and young parents who are wanting to learn more about this industry. The wonderful book which is written by Julien Martinson. It's available on Amazon, and the sole link I will share the details as well. Do check out. That's available in Kindle right now. It's just available in Kindle, right?
It's Amazon, and it's also available on other platforms as well as yeah. So just Google the Ultimate Guide to Careers in Aviation.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So that gives an overview of the industry. So that's very good. And Julian, if somebody wants to come back to you and have a kind of a one-to-one interaction with you with respect to industry, would you be interested to take up such engagements from the listeners?
Yes, I'm always available online, and you can reach out to me on my website at www.julienmartinson.com, and I provide career coaching is available, and I'm also available as an aviation speaker. Should there be any career events coming up, I can would be welcome as I'd be welcomed as an aviation speaker.
Great. So Julian, thank you so much for giving your time today and sharing all your insight about the industry. It's really a fascinating industry, great opportunity for young people who want to build a career in this industry. And to learn more about the industry, obviously you can read the book, which is fantastic. It's a good, easy read. It's not very complicated. Decent paced, and number of chapters are there to talk about different subjects. So I would encourage people who are interested to get into the industry to go ahead and buy this book and follow Julien on his website and on his social media platforms, and reach out to him in case you want to have a one-to-one chat with him. So with those words, I thank you once again for your time today, and look forward to catching up with you sometimes later. Maybe talk a little more in deep about a particular subject in the aviation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me to be on your podcast, and I wish you all the best, and I look forward to staying in touch with you in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.